Today, Road to GH will revealing a heavy shadow looms over Port Charles as General Hospital becomes the center of an unfolding crisis. Whispers echo through the sterile hallways, not just idle gossip, but ominous warnings of an impending tragedy. Two beloved characters, long considered pillars of the community, now find themselves teetering on the edge between life and death. One lies unconscious after a mysterious car crash that left more questions than answers, while the other collapsed unexpectedly during a routine shift at the clinic, prompting a frantic response from medical staff. The atmosphere inside the hospital is thick with tension. Doctors, nurses, and loved ones gather near the intensive care unit, their faces etched with fear, anxiety, and fragile hope. The steady beeping of monitors marks each second like a countdown, amplifying the urgency of the moment. While some have begun to brace for the worst, others cling to prayers, willing fate to turn its course. Port Charles has seen its share of shocks and miracles, but no one can say for certain whether this is the beginning of a heartbreaking goodbye or the dawn of an unexpected medical miracle. A chilling sense of inevitability has begun to descend over Port Charles, as subtle clues from recent previews and storyline spoilers suggest that death may soon reach the doorstep of two beloved characters. One of those potentially facing their final hours is none other than Sonny, the longtime mob boss whose presence has defined the delicate balance of power in the city for decades. But this time, it isn't a rival's bullet or a betrayal from within his own ranks that threatens his life. It's something far more personal, far more relentless: his own heart. For years, Sonny has been a towering figure in Port Charles, feared and respected in equal measure. His enemies have tried and failed to take him down, yet the most dangerous enemy may now lie within. Recent symptoms, ignored at first, brushed aside as stress or fatigue, begin to culminate into something much more serious. In a moment of terrifying vulnerability, Sonny is brought to his knees by a sudden, excruciating chest pain. With no one nearby to help and no time to call for aid, his world narrows to a single terrifying realization: this could be the end. But Sonny's failing health is only the beginning of a much larger storm brewing in the shadows of Port Charles. Enter Ava, who has watched Sonny spiral with growing concern. Though not out of affection or nostalgia, her focus is crystal clear: Avery, their daughter. For Ava, the possibility of Sonny's death doesn't just pose an emotional crisis, it presents a legal and personal battlefield. If Sonny dies, the question of Avery's custody will come to the forefront, and Ava is determined to ensure her daughter will not be raised in the chaos and danger Sonny always seemed to invite into his orbit. Ava, never one to sit idly by, begins to move behind the scenes, preparing for the worst. She consults attorneys, speaks quietly with allies, and starts to reassert herself as the primary guardian in Avery's life. But even her calculated actions cannot prevent what could come next, because Sonny's death would send shockwaves through every corner of Port Charles. Without Sonny Corinthos, a power vacuum unlike any before would be created. For years, Sonny has kept the city's darkest impulses in check through intimidation, negotiation, and an uneasy peace among the four major family factions. His absence would mean a total collapse of that fragile balance. Old grudges would reignite. Hidden ambitions would come to light. Jason, Carly, Michael, and even Dante would be forced to reassess their roles, not just in Sonny's world, but in the city itself. Enemies lurking in the shadows would no longer hesitate, and allies may be tempted to turn on each other in the scramble for dominance. It wouldn't just be a death, it would be the collapse of an entire ecosystem of influence, power, and legacy. The Corinthos name has been both a shield and a weapon in Port Charles. Without its patriarch, the family could fracture, the alliances could unravel, and the city could be plunged into a war unlike anything seen before. And yet, for all this chaos, the most heartbreaking part is deeply human. Sonny, once untouchable, now lies alone and broken, possibly facing the end not with a dramatic shootout or a courtroom standoff, but in silence, betrayed by the very heart that once beat so fiercely for those he loved. Whether or not he survives, The scars of this moment will be long-lasting for Ava, for Avery, and for the city that may never be the same again. In a twist that feels both shocking and eerily familiar, Ava now holds the key to Sonny's survival, quite literally. As Sonny's condition deteriorates rapidly due to what appears to be a serious cardiac episode, he finds himself weaker, disoriented, and in desperate need of the one thing that could save him, his heart medication. But that medication, for reasons only Ava knows, is in her possession, and she hasn't decided whether to hand it over. This moment echoes one of the most iconic scenes in General Hospital history, when Edward Quartermain faked a heart attack to test his daughter Tracy's loyalty, only to discover the terrifying truth about how far someone would go to gain control. But this time, it's real. Sonny's life is truly hanging in the balance. And Ava, fully aware of the power she holds, is standing at a moral crossroads. She could choose compassion, rush to his aid, and restore the balance of life and death. Or she could use this moment, this precious, perilous opportunity, to negotiate terms that Sonny may not be able to refuse. The question haunting the walls of the Corinthos estate is whether Ava's concern for Avery, or her own lingering resentment, will guide her next move. She's never forgotten the instability Sonny's lifestyle brought into their daughter's world, nor the fear that clung to every custody battle and whispered threat. In her eyes, this could be justice, or at the very least, a necessary correction to a legacy of violence and recklessness. Holding the medication in her hand, Ava has the power to make Sonny listen, to demand concessions, or even to change the very course of their family's future. What complicates matters further is that, upstairs, Kristina is innocently playing with Donna, blissfully unaware of the deadly standoff unfolding just a floor below. The ticking clock, the silence of the house, the weight of unspoken choices, all of it tightens the noose around Sonny's fading strength. Ava could walk away a savior, or she could walk away with leverage. Either way, this isn't just about Sonny's health, it's about Ava rewriting the rules of their relationship. And then there's the elephant in the room, Maurice Bernard, who has carried the role of Sonny Corinthos for decades, has openly mused about the possibility of retirement. Could this be the beginning of the end? Or simply a brutal test of how far his character can be pushed before rising again, reborn from the ashes? Either way, one thing is certain, if Sonny's life is hanging in the balance, then Ava's choice is the fulcrum, and Port Charles will never be the same depending on which way she leans. On the other side of the rapidly unraveling chaos in Port Charles, a shocking and deeply personal revelation begins to unfold, one that threatens to shatter the already fragile Corinthos family. Kristina, still raw with grief and anger over the tragic loss of the unborn child she had intended to carry for her sister Molly and TJ, is no longer able to contain her resentment. In a reckless moment of desperation and blame, it appears Kristina may have taken matters into her own hands, sabotaging Ava's car by cutting the brake lines in what she believed was a calculated move to eliminate the woman she held responsible for her pain. But fate, as it often does in Port Charles, had other plans. When the accident occurred, it was not Ava behind the wheel, but Rick, accompanied by Elizabeth, who had simply been in the wrong place at the wrong time. The crash was brutal. Emergency sirens filled the air, and within minutes, the news began to spread. Rick was critically injured, but it was Elizabeth who bore the brunt of the impact. Her condition turned dire quickly, leaving doctors scrambling and loved ones praying. The truth of what Kristina had done began to seep through the cracks, and the fallout was immediate. Lucky Spencer, returning to town under already emotional circumstances, was stunned and devastated upon learning that Elizabeth, the woman he had loved for so many years, was now fighting for her life. His confrontation with Kristina was raw and chaotic, his voice strained, eyes wide with disbelief as he demanded answers. The panic in his expression betrayed the truth. This wasn't just about Rick or about justice, it was about Elizabeth and the very real possibility of losing her forever. Kristina, normally grounded and self-aware, found herself spiraling. Her guilt clashed violently with her original intent. She hadn't meant for anyone else to get hurt. She thought Ava would be the one behind the wheel. She thought she could control the outcome. But now, with Elizabeth unconscious and the weight of her actions bearing down on her, Kristina faced the stark reality that she may have committed an unforgivable act. As the town slowly learns what happened, the consequences threaten to be severe. Ava, who survived the attempt on her life unscathed, is furious, less for herself than for the potential danger to Avery. Molly and TJ are reeling, both at the loss of their child and now the knowledge that Kristina's grief may have driven her to a place neither of them could have imagined. The Davis family, once tightly bonded, is fractured, and the rift may only deepen. And then there's Elizabeth. Will she wake up? Will she ever know how close she came to death at the hands of someone she once considered family? Will Lucky have the chance to finally reunite with her, or will their long, unfinished love story come to a tragic and untimely end? Rebecca Herbst's potential exit from the canvas feels almost unthinkable, especially with Jonathan Jackson back as Lucky and their chemistry still radiating with the same emotional depth it always has. But General Hospital is no stranger to heartbreak, and nothing in Port Charles ever remains untouched by the unpredictable hand of fate. The ripple effects of Sonny's heart attack and the looming possibility of his death threaten to send Port Charles into a spiral of emotional, legal, and territorial chaos. For years, Sonny has held together a delicate network of loyalty, fear, and power. The moment his life teeters on the edge, so too does the balance that has long defined the city's underworld and its complex family dynamics. But at the heart of this crisis stands Ava, caught between vengeance and compassion, power and humanity. In the moments after Sonny collapses, clutching his chest and gasping for breath, the tension is palpable. Ava finds herself alone with the man who has both tormented and protected her, who is, perhaps more importantly, the father of her child. Holding the very medication that could stabilize Sonny, Ava becomes the gatekeeper between life and death. For a fleeting moment, she considers withholding it, not out of cruelty, but out of exhaustion, frustration, and the desire to finally take back control after years of living in Sonny's volatile shadow. Rumors begin to circulate that Ava may have allowed Sonny to suffer, that she is to blame for his condition worsening. Whispers call her ruthless, even evil, painting her as the woman who stood by and watched the most powerful man in Port Charles gasp his final breath. But buried beneath the sharp-edged assumptions is a truth far more complicated. Ava doesn't walk away. In an act that surprises even herself, Ava makes the decision to save him. With trembling hands, she administers the medication, calls for help, and stays by Sonny's side as emergency responders arrive. It is not a move made for love, nor for redemption, but for Avery. Because in her heart, Ava knows that if she lets Sonny die, their daughter will inherit nothing but resentment and sorrow. And while she's played the villain many times before, she refuses to let Avery lose her father in such a cold, preventable way. This act of mercy transforms everything. Sonny, upon regaining consciousness and learning the truth, is overwhelmed. Gratitude mixes with disbelief. He knows the power Ava had in that moment. He knows she could have let him go and claimed plausible deniability. And yet, she didn't. In saving him, Ava earns something far greater than temporary leverage. She earns Sonny's respect. That newfound respect changes the entire trajectory of their custody arrangement. No longer just tolerated, Ava becomes a legitimate, equal parent in Sonny's eyes. He softens, perhaps for the first time in years, and begins to view her not as a threat, but as a necessary presence in Avery's life. With Sonny's gratitude comes influence, and with that influence, Ava gains ground she never could have achieved through court battles or manipulation. In the eyes of the town, Ava may still be polarizing, hailed by some as a mother who did the right thing, vilified by others for even considering letting Sonny die, but in Sonny's world, her place has shifted. Kristina crossed a line that can no longer be ignored. Her impulsive decision to tamper with Ava's car, an act fueled by vengeance over the loss of the baby she was carrying for Molly and TJ, has set off a deadly chain of events, one that now threatens to send her to prison. Kristina believed she was striking back at the woman she blamed for her emotional collapse, thinking that if Ava suffered, perhaps some semblance of justice would be restored. But fate intervened in the cruelest way. When the car crashed, it wasn't Ava behind the wheel, it was Rick Lansing and, beside him, Elizabeth Baldwin. Rick's injuries were serious, but Elizabeth took the brunt of the impact, leaving her in critical condition, possibly beyond saving. And in that single, irreversible moment, Kristina transformed from a grieving sister into a criminal responsible for an innocent life teetering on the edge. As the investigation unfolds, evidence begins to mount. The tampered brake line. Witnesses placing Kristina near Ava's car. Her emotional outbursts in the days leading up to the crash. Even those closest to her, Molly, TJ, Alexis, struggled to defend her actions, knowing in their hearts that this was no accident. It was premeditated, however emotionally charged, and the law will not turn a blind eye. Especially not with a beloved nurse like Elizabeth fighting for her life. Lucky Spencer, shattered by Elizabeth's condition, is relentless in his pursuit of the truth. When he confronts Kristina, his anguish is raw, his words cutting, and for a moment, Kristina finally sees the full weight of what she's done. But guilt, however genuine, cannot undo damage. The people of Port Charles want justice, and justice, in this case, may mean prison. There is no redemption arc waiting at the end of this path. Kristina's descent into darkness, driven by obsessive blame and unchecked emotion, has made her dangerous. A woman capable of attempted murder, even unintentionally, is a threat not only to Ava, but to anyone caught in the wake of her emotional volatility. And now, that wake includes Elizabeth, possibly dying, and a town forever altered by her recklessness. In the end, prison may not only be justice, it may be the only path left to prevent further destruction. For the first time, the Corinthos name won't be enough to shield her. The same people who once fought for Kristina's redemption may be forced to step back and let her face the full consequences. Because Port Charles cannot afford another tragedy. And Kristina, through her own rage and sorrow, has become exactly that.